This is live from New Delhi. You're watching DT India Live, India's Watch to the World. I'm Sakal Bhatt, and coming up in the next 30 minutes. Jailed Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu declared opposition presidential candidate amidst fierce protests. Stocks slump, currency plunges amid political tensions. US and Russia talk on maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea and other confidence-building measures in Riyadh. Kremlin says both sides have common understanding on need for settlement. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney calls for a snap poll on 28th of April amid trade war with US. Turkey's embattled leader Ekrem İmamoğlu was officially nominated as a presidential candidate by the opposition Republic People's Party for the 2028 elections as thousands continue to protest against İmamoğlu's arrest. CHP, which is the main opposition party and the second largest party in parliament, held a primary election on Sunday at which the only candidate was İmamoğlu, the main political rival of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. DD India's Antra Sinha gets you more.
The arrest of former mayor of Istanbul has triggered a tsunami of protests in Turkey. Tens of thousands of protesters clashed with police on Istanbul Sunday as demonstrations against the arrest of Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu entered their fifth day. Rattled by the deluge of violent protests, Turkish President Erdogan is calling it street terrorism. The protesters say that the moves against İmamoğlu, including slapping of corruption charges, are a blatant attempt to silence President Tayyip Erdogan's main political rival. Istanbul streets witnessed pitched, intense battles as police fired pepper spray and tear gas at protesters who retaliated by throwing fireworks and projectiles. İmamoğlu's wife, Dilek İmamoğlu, denounced the charges against her husband as unlawful and an example of blatant injustice. We had a hard day today for all of us, but what do we say? We will win by resisting. They arrested Ekrem. They do not realize how, in the conscience of millions, this is an unjust and unlawful decision. But they will learn. This is a very deep pain of blatant injustice. Amid protests, Turkey's main opposition CHP held a symbolic primary. The poll was intra-party, but the outpouring of support for İmamoğlu made the party open the voting to anyone who wished to participate. 15 million voters decided to vote. The massive turnout highlights İmamoğlu's broad appeal and cements his status as a key challenger to President Erdogan. The primary has become a rallying point for opposition.
We expect the government to turn back from this mistake. We want the law to really work. We want it to decide independently. We will do our best for this. We will continue to struggle.
I think İmamoğlu's arrest and detention decision is completely unlawful. It was also there during the persecution of our friends. It makes me very emotional to witness everything firsthand.
The arrest of and action against İmamoğlu has sparked a protest of unprecedented scale, and anger is increasing by each passing day, with protesters determined to carry on till demands are met. Turkey is in for chaotic and destabilizing days ahead. Antra Sinha for DD India.
Bu çocuklar sizin çocuklarınız.
In other news, U.S. and Russian officials are holding talks in Saudi Arabia on Monday aimed at making progress and brokering broad ceasefire in Ukraine, with Washington eyeing a Black Sea ceasefire deal before securing a wider agreement. Now, according to the sources, the U.S. side was being led by Andrew Peek, a senior director at the White House National Security Council, and Michael Anton, a senior State Department official. The White House says the aim of the talks is to reach a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea, allowing the free flow of shipping, while Russia is being represented by Grigory Karasin, a former diplomat who is now chair of the Federation Council's of Foreign Affairs Committee, and Sergei Baseda, an advisor to the director of the Federal Security Service. The Kremlin said on Monday that Russia and United States had a common understanding, however, adding that these negotiations are focused on technical issues, including the Black Sea Initiative, which is about the security of shipping in the region.
There is a common understanding. There are still many different aspects related to the settlement to be worked out.
Earlier on Sunday, U.S. officials held talks with the Ukrainian delegation led by Defense Minister Rustem Umerov in Saudi Arabia. Defense Minister Umerov described talks as constructive and meaningful, focusing on protecting energy facilities and critical infrastructure. He emphasized President Zelensky's aim is of achieving a just, lasting peace for Ukraine and Europe. The discussions are part of the U.S. President Donald Trump's diplomatic efforts to resolve the three-year Ukraine-Russia conflict. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian president stated on Sunday that the discussions with the U.S. in Saudi were productive and Ukraine's delegation contributed constructively to the talks.
Today marks the second meeting between the Ukrainian and U.S. teams in Saudi Arabia, this time at a more technical level. Our military, our diplomats, and our representatives from the Ministry of Energy. I just spoke with Rustem Umerov. He briefed me on the meeting and the course of the negotiations. Our team is working in a completely constructive manner. The conversation is quite useful.
Абсолютно конструктивно.
Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron will host a summit of the coalition of the willing supporting Ukraine on March 27th to discuss the further military aid for Kyiv or Ukraine. Meeting will focus on short-term military support for Ukrainian forces and explore how European countries can provide long-term security guarantees to help Ukraine sustain its defense. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and leaders from multiple European countries are expected to attend the Paris summit. Zelensky is urging European Union leaders to promptly approve a package of at least $5.45 billion for artillery shells and continued pressure on Russia. Well, shifting focus to Canada, where political campaigns have started to gather momentum after Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney called a snap election for April 28th. The election in Canada comes at a time when tension with U.S. is running high on tariff front. Mark Carney is seeking votes to deal with the threat from U.S., while opposition Conservatives blames Carney to be an elitist who plans to continue policy of high government spending. Other key players in elections are Bloc Québécois and New Democratic Party. DD India's Fuzail Ahmed reports.
Leaders of political parties in Canada have started their campaign after the announcement of snap elections for April 28th. Besides handling of soaring housing costs and an affordability crisis, tariff war with the United States is likely to dominate the elections in Canada. Although the next election was not due until October 20th, Mark Carney is hoping to capitalize on a remarkable recovery by his Liberal Party in the polls since January, when Trump began threatening Canada.
Our response must be to build a strong economy and a more secure Canada. President Trump claims that Canada isn't a real country. He wants to break us so America can own us. We will not let that happen. We're over the shock of the betrayal, but we should never forget the lessons. We have to look out for ourselves. We have to look out for each other.
Riding the anti-incumbency wave until recently, the Conservatives now seek to rekindle the anger and disappointment associated with Justin Trudeau's economic policies. They have sought to portray Mark Carney as an elitist who plans to continue the Trudeau-era policy of high government spending.
They are the same Liberals, with the same ministers, the same MPs, the same advisors, the same policies, and even today making the same promises that they've been breaking for over 10 years. And who did they choose to bring in? Mr. Carney. Under the Liberals, led by Trudeau or Carney, what we have is out-of-touch, weak leadership. And for Mr. Carney, someone who will not stand up for our country.
On the other hand, Bloc Québécois is a key player in predominantly French-speaking province of Quebec.
I do not have the feeling that Quebecers trust so much Mr. Poilievre. And I do not have the feeling that Quebecers know so much about Mr. Carney. So if what they propose is good, they have nothing to fear, because as we did in the last 6 years, we will support what is good for Quebec.
While left-leaning New Democratic Party focuses on worker and labor issues. The announcement of elections come at a time when tensions have escalated with the United States. US presidential tariffs and calls to annex Canada have fueled anger among many Canadians. Thousands rallied in downtown Toronto for Elbows Up Canada amid US-Canada trade war. Huge demonstrations, enough to assure all that Trump trade and tariffs are going to be a major factor in these polls. Fuzail Ahmed's report for DD India.
In other news, President Lula of Brazil, the biggest economy in South America, is on a 3-day visit to Japan starting Monday. During the visit, the two countries will discuss the reforms of the UN Security Council under the G4 platform. But the main focus of the visit is more economic engagement. DD India's Shobhan Saxena in Sao Paulo, Brazil, gets us this report.
President Lula da Silva of Brazil is on a 3-day visit to Japan starting March 24th. This is the 5th time that the Brazilian president is visiting Japan as the two countries celebrate the 130th anniversary of Brazil-Japan diplomatic relations this year. This trip of President Lula to Japan is a state visit. The president will be received by Emperor Naruhito at the Imperial Palace on Monday. The Brazilian leader will also attend a working meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba on Tuesday. A massive business event has been organized by the Brazilian Foreign Ministry with the support of the Brazil's National Confederation of Industry. More than 500 business people from the food, agribusiness, space, energy, logistics and steel sectors are expected to attend this gathering on Tuesday. Japan, the second biggest economy in Asia, is the 9th largest source of foreign investment in Brazil, with more than $35 billion of investment over the last 3 years. In 2024, Brazil and Japan registered a trade exchange of $11 billion, with a Brazilian surplus of $146 million. Brazil has the largest Japanese diaspora in the world, with an estimated 2 million people of Japanese origin living in Brazil. While Japan is home to the 5th largest Brazilian community abroad, with around 200,000 people of Brazilian origin living in Japan. One of the main objectives of President Lula's visit to Japan is to boost the trade in priority sectors and also add new sectors. The Brazilian government wants Japan to open its market to more Brazilian products.
And still to come on this edition of DD India Live. On the other side, we talk about search operations underway at Kathua in India's Jammu and Kashmir after a terrorist encounter. And Waves manga contest was organized in Mumbai on Sunday.
Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked. We just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
You're watching DD India Live. I'm Sakal Bhatt, and now let's move on to latest on Kathua encounter, where security forces have recovered ammunition from the encounter site in Sanyal area in Kathua district of Jammu and Kashmir. The Indian Army, NSG and the Special Operations Group and the Central Reserve Police Force are carrying out a cordon and search operation in the area. The joint operation was launched on Sunday night after security forces received input regarding the presence of terrorists. This comes after a firing incident was reported in the Hiranagar area during a search operation by security forces. And in Poonch, security forces busted a major terrorist hideout in a remote forest area in Poonch district of Jammu Kashmir, leading to the recovery of huge cache of arms and explosives. The hideout was unearthed during a joint operation by Rashtriya Rifles and Special Operations Group of local police in Sarbara near Sangla Top during the day-long operation. However, no one has been arrested during this operation. The penultimate week of the budget session of Parliament saw proceedings in both houses adjourned following uproar by the opposition members. Lok Sabha or the lower house witnessed adjournment twice after opposition MPs carried posters as an act that the Speaker strongly disapproved of. The Speaker reminded the House that a previous decision has barred members from bringing any kind of posters inside the chamber. Meanwhile, after the House met at 2 p.m., the Finance Bill 2025 was taken up for discussion. The Finance Bill is brought to implement the financial proposals of the central government. While the Rajya Sabha or the upper house of Parliament was also adjourned twice amid similar disruptions, the uproar escalated when Parliamentary Affairs Minister Kiran Rijiju raised the issue of Karnataka Deputy Chief Minister D.K. Shivkumar's reported statement about amending the constitution to provide reservations for Muslims. This led to loud protests from the opposition benches, further stalling proceedings. With tensions running high, all eyes will be on the Parliament when the sessions resumes later today. Besides, Rajya Sabha Chairman Jagdeep Dhankar today convened a meeting on Monday with the leader of the House JP Nadda and leader of the opposition Mallikarjun Kharge to discuss judicial accountability and National Judicial Appointments Commission Act. After the meeting, Dhankar said that the issue needs to be deliberated with the floor leaders, for which an invitation will be sent to floor leaders in the Council of States to take a call.
We had meaningful deliberation about the issue that is agitating the mind of judiciary. It is for the first time since independence that a Chief Justice has, in a transparent, accountable manner, put all material available to him in public domain and shared it without keeping anything with the court.
In Rajya Sabha, Congress MP Jairam Ramesh had raised his concerns over the issue of cash recovery at the residence of the Delhi High Court judge on 21st of March. It urged the Chairman Dhankar or the Vice President Dhankar to direct the government to come up with solutions. The NJAC Act was passed by Parliament in 2014 but later scrapped by Supreme Court as unconstitutional. Moving on, as part of the upcoming Waves, the Media and Entertainment Association of India, in collaboration with the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, organized Waves Anime and Manga Contest in Mumbai on Sunday. Well, as many as 297 participants participated in the contest that aims to champion India's creator economy under the Create in India initiative. Similar rounds were held at cities like Guwahati, Kolkata, Bhubaneswar, Varanasi and Delhi.
We are doing this challenge called WAM, which is anime, manga and webtoons competition. In this, we are hunting talents, we are giving the scope to the artist to bring up their IPs. So we have decided to go to the 11 cities. 5 cities in the east has been done, and now we are in the 6th city, Mumbai.
I think this event has really brought out the best in kids and allowing them to explore their creativity, bring it out to the world. And I think that's a huge thing. It's a first step, like I said before, it's the first step in taking anime manga to the next level in India.
It's really exciting to see how our young kids are so talented, and this actually provides them with a very good platform to build their talent more in the future.
Well, at a time when the United States is tightening rules for immigration and students from abroad, Australia has offered extended work rights and career support to Indian students going for studies. South Australian universities are also offering extended work rights and career support to those Indian students. The announcement was made at a special event in Delhi where top Australian universities participated to showcase Adelaide as a premier global study destination. This move is backed by the government of South Australia, whose Premier Peter Malinauskas was also present at the event. India remains the largest source of international studies in South Australia, with over 16,000 students currently pursuing higher studies in the region. Well, on this occasion, DD India correspondent Akhilesh Suman spoke exclusively to the Premier of the South Australia, Peter Malinauskas, on opportunities for students and much more. Listen.
The Premier of South Australia, Peter Malinauskas, with me. Premier, you are here in Delhi. What is the agenda? What do you want from here?
First and foremost is international education. We are so lucky in South Australia to be home to a lot of Indian students who come to our world-class universities, and we want to continue to grow that. It's a big opportunity not just for education and economic exchange, but also cultural exchange. The state of South Australia has got its open heart towards Indian students who can come to a really safe place to study and then share that, like I said, economic power of education.
So do you think that what Americans are doing, President Donald Trump is doing, what will be the impact of Australian education?
Well, we see, where the rest of the world is looking in, South Australia is looking out, and we're particularly looking to India, a beautiful country with a liberal democracy that is strong, a set of values that is committed to education and the sharing of it, and we can make a contribution to that, particularly in South Australia, which is such a safe place to live, that's easily accessible.
Are you going to open campus in India also, or you want Indian students to go there?
Well, we love having Indian students come from India to South Australia. There are scholarships available, but more than that, there are great universities, very large universities that offer high quality courses across a range of different sectors, where there is a great degree of, consistency between how the Indian economy is growing and how this Australian economy is growing.
So India and Australia have big opportunities, not only in education, but in many other fields. Akhilesh Suman for DD India from Delhi.
Let's move on to more news. India's Union Cabinet, chaired by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, has sanctioned the incentive scheme for promoting low-value BHIM UPI transactions for the financial year 2024-25. The initiative aligns with the government's mission to enhance digital payment adoption, encourage small merchants to utilize UPI and advance financial inclusion. Promotion of digital payments is an integral part of the government's strategy for financial inclusion and providing wide-ranging payment options to the common man. And now let's go live across to Mumbai, where Chairperson of the Securities and Exchange Board of India, or SEBI, Tuhin Kantapande, is holding a presser.
Some of these points, and then you have questions. So broadly, we had in this board meeting, I would say it was more on ease of business and ease of compliance. The first proposal was to increase in terms of the FPI regulations, liberalization in terms of increasing the threshold under size criteria in the additional disclosure framework. So you recall that FPI, regulations were changed in 2019, where we had this Press 3 note press note 3 things was brought in as a size criteria of 25,000 crore. And subsequently on August 24, 2023, also there was also regulatory change on concentration criterion in relation to, the MPS and SAST regulations. So therefore, additional disclosure was required. And now, these things were fixed in 2022. The average trading volume in the cash market has increased 122%. So taking into consideration of that, the board has decided to revise based on public comments and recommendations of FPI Advisory Committee. So this size criteria is now being taken from 25,000 crore to 50,000 crore. But please note that the concentration criteria remains the same, that is 50%. So irrespective of the size, the 50% concentration criteria remains, and in case 50% is breached, then additional disclosure will be required. So that is the first decision. The second decision was in terms of AIF regulations. So Regulation 17A of SEBI AIF regulations, there, we have this category 2 AIFs, which are required to hold a majority of their investments in unlisted securities. Now, there have been recent changes to SEBI listing obligations and disclosure requirement regulations, in which we require that the entity that has issued listed debt securities can issue fresh debt only in listed form. So therefore, there has been an apprehension from the industry that the adequate unlisted debt may not be available. So there was also a request from the side to provide alternatives. So keeping in view the credit risk, because AIFs typically can take greater risk. So you have a liquidity risk as well as a credit risk. So in terms of credit risk, we have ratings. So some of the listed bonds which are in A category or below, they could be considered as relatively having greater risk. So they are also being allowed to the AIF in addition to the unlisted debt securities. So that is a decision. I think it is also an ease of compliance and ease of business for the AIF industry, because even if they are holding some unlisted debt, there is an apprehension that they may also get listed subsequently. So therefore, they will be falling short of the 50% requirements of unlisted debt, which is currently obtaining in case of AIF regulation. So this has been done again in consultation with the concerned committee, AIPAC, by the SEBI. The third decision, again relating to ease of compliance, is in relation to advance fee to be charged by investment advisors and research analysts. So IA and RA regulations were earlier rationalized to address many concerns of the industry, and these have been welcomed. However, there have been concerns regarding some of the fee-related provisions, in particular the provisions which restricted collection of advance fee. And this was restricted to 2 quarters by the IARAs, to 6 months by IAs, and 1 quarter for the RAs, research analyst. So this has been now again considering the ARRIA and ARIA, taking into consideration their representations, and through this again the committee process, I said the board has decided to relax it, and now IAs and RAs may charge fees in advance up to a period of 1 year. Earlier, IAs and RAs were allowed to charge advance fee for a maximum period of 2 quarters and 1 quarter respectively. And please note that this is only for this fee restrictions, etc., what we are talking about is only in respect of individual and HUFs, not being accredited investors. The issue is that accredited investors and the institutional investors are very well in a position to negotiate fees and have contracts, longer term contracts as well. But it's the individual and HUFs that temporarily we are providing this protection of a fee and fee limits and also mode of payment as well as refund and other things. But this move to extend that to 1 year is also sensible in terms of longer term advice that they would then require, because we also want, SEBI also wants morely long, trying to have long-term equity exposure, long-term investments rather than short-term speculative activities. Another proposal in that light is also, again, ease of compliance thing. We had actually taken a board decision earlier on December 18, 2024, in which SEBI Merchant Bankers Regulations 1992, SEBI Debenture Trustee Regulations 1993, and SEBI Custodians Regulation 1996 were sought to be amended. And there was one issue which related to creating a separate legal entity in case we have, they are taking up some unregulated activity, which means an activity which is not regulated by either of the regulators, maybe any of the regulators, either SEBI or RBI or any other regulator. Then in that case, we needed to, we required them to hive off in next 2 years into a separate entity. Of course, we had given certain dispensation in terms of sharing of resources, etc. However, we have taken an internal review and we feel that the alternative approaches may be possible in order to mitigate the risk, at the same time creating the ease of doing business for them. So therefore, it has been decided that we will come back again to the board for a revised proposal. Till that time, we will not operate the earlier decision which was done, which was taken on December 18, 2024. So then we have, these are basically the ease of compliance and ease of business measures. There is one measure relating to governance, and this provision is relating to appointment of public interest directors, cooling off period for key management personnel and directors, and the appointment process for specific KMPs in market infrastructure institutions. So, based on the feedback received from various stakeholders regarding appointment of PIDs on the governing board of MIs without the approval of the shareholders, the process for appointment of PID were reviewed. Similarly, this cooling off period issue was, reviewed. Governance of MIs, the various KMPs, their issues were reviewed. And after the review, the board has taken the following decisions. One, the existing process for appointment of PIDs, which requires prior approval of SEBI but does not mandate shareholder approval, shall continue. Second, if the governing board of an MII decides not to reappoint an existing PID after his or her first term, it must record the rationale for this decision and communicate it to SEBI. Third, cooling off period for KMPs and directors of MIIs moving to competing MIIs. For that, the governing board of an MII may prescribe a minimum cooling period for its KMPs and directors, including managing director and PIDs, before joining a competing MII. SEBI will no longer prescribe a cooling off period for PIDs transitioning from one MII to another. So far as the process for appointment of specific KMPs in MIIs, the appointment, reappointment or termination of specific KMPs, which includes compliance officer, chief risk officer, chief technology officer and chief information security officers, namely CEO, CRIO, CTO and CISO, by whatever designation called in vertical 1, which belongs to critical operations, and vertical 2, which belongs to regulatory, compliance, risk management and investor grievances side, shall require approval of the managing board of the MIIs, which was hitherto with the nomination and remuneration committee of the MII. So therefore, it's being upgraded that instead of only the NRC, it has to be through the governing board of the MIIs. And a process is also being prescribed through a selection process, which then MII has to appoint an independent selection committee, which will then report to NRC, and then the NRC makes recommendations to the governing board. So therefore, that process is getting strengthened for all these 4 category of officers. This was on the governance side. And now I think the issue on SEBI governance itself. So the day I had joined, I had mentioned that we'll come up with our plan, how we will handle the conflict of interest and other issues. So today the board has decided to constitute a high-level committee to undertake a comprehensive review of the provisions relating to conflict of interest, disclosures pertaining to property, investments, liabilities, etc., and related matters in respect of members, that includes the chairman and officials of the board. As you know, we have there is a code of conduct of 2008 in respect of members of the board, including chairman. And there is also ESR, Employee Service Regulations 2001 for the employees. There are issues relating to conflict of interest. There are also issues relating to disclosures, also property, investments, liabilities, how it is to be reported. So the high-level committee needs to be constituted away from SEBI, an independent committee. The SEBI will provide the secretariat help. Best practices will be studied. HLC will comprise of eminent persons and experts with relevant background and experience in constitutional, statutory, regulatory bodies, government, public sector, private sector, and academia. The names of HLC members will be announced in due course. The objective of the HLC is to comprehensively review and make recommendations for enhancing the existing framework for managing conflict of interest, disclosures, and related matters towards ensuring the high standards of transparency, accountability, and ethical conduct of members and officials of the board. The HLC is expected to submit its recommendations within 3 months from the date of constitution, which shall be placed before the board for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We will, just a humble request, we are meeting sir for the first time. I'm sure everyone wants to ask a lot of questions. A small request, let's start with one question each. And if you don't mind, we can also introduce ourselves. Thank you so much. Please, let's go around the line. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Ankur Mishra from ET Now. Thank you, sir, for giving the opportunity. And since it's your first conference after you have taken over, so I would want to start with a broader question. You have mentioned about FPI's ease of doing business. Conflict of interest too came in this board meeting. What is your larger message to the stakeholders, if you can start with that?
I think there is no larger message except that we have a very robust institution and we'll carry it forward. in terms of, the best outcomes that we can have. We have 3 mandates in SEBI. One is investor protection. Secondly, we have to develop the market. And third, we have to regulate it. Now, all these mandates is a very big task that we have. And I think with the team that we have, which I find very, very robust team, and which is another team, several teams which are outside with whom we work very intensively, we can always, create the best of the framework in order to meet our mandate.
So just one quick thing, ma'am.
I'm really sorry. Rajesh, please. Sorry.
Sir, Brajesh from Money Control. Sir, my first question is, you said here that you have taken back this approval of this hiving of merchant bankers and other businesses. So what is the reason behind that?
No, what we are saying is that if there is an alternative approaches exist in order to ease the business, we will explore that. Because everything what we do has a certain cost. So we have to, if the risk can be mitigated otherwise, then we will explore those things as well. Hiving of entities would mean that you have to create is a certain cost which you have to incur. So whether we can do it, and secondly, there is also an issue of level playing field. Like, for example, what in that proposal was that, maybe the banks which are regulated by the RBI, there the hiving off will not be done. The banks which are not regulated by the RBI, their hiving will be done. In some respects, it's a non-playing field also. So I think we have to be a little more nuanced and clear on whenever we are doing regulatory changes. Going forward, our effort would be to have, we do have consultative mechanism, but we will also be more mindful of, whether we are unnecessarily creating a burden, extra burden on the industry. If we can achieve the same objective otherwise. Right? It's the way, so effective regulation and optimum regulation is our goal.
Lata Venkatesh, CNBC TV 18. Thank you for the opportunity. Mr. Chairman, you have raised the threshold for disclosures from 25,000 crore to 50,000 crore. Can you give us an idea of how many entities and how much amount of funds therefore escape, disclosures? Also, in this 50% which you have not changed, 50% exposure to one stock, can you give us the final data on how many entities did not disclose and therefore had to wind up, or how many of them, because of your rule, changed? They were given a cooling off period, so how many of them changed? What is the net amount of funds that had to close down or were affected?
See, there are many exemptions also. Like, for example, many of the funds, sovereign funds, government largely public funds, were also in any case exempt from this. So basically widely held. Now, it is not to say that disclosures are not there. There are disclosures which are required as per the PMLA. So KYC and PMLA disclosures, in any case are applicable for every FPI. It's only that more granular exposure is that we are talking. So let us not say that in fact, there's a very detailed KYC and there is very detailed exposures. But if you are really going down to more granular exposure, is that what is there? So I don't think that there would be very many. But the question is that if you set a limit, business start operating at that level. So the question is, I think the capital is needed, so there is no need to artificially restrict the capital to 25k crore when markets have grown.
At the moment, there's no number between 25,000 and 50,000 who immediately get excused. As well, that 50% question.
Well, some of them, who may be operating at 25k level, then can now bring more money. It's like, as I said, that people start operating. आप 10% रखो 9.99 में आ जाएगा. It's like
Hi, good evening. This is Menika Doshi from Bloomberg. I want to go to the last point that you made in terms of the approval by the board to set up a high-level committee on the conflict of interest disclosures and related matters. Is this a tacit admission that there were some violations, in the recent past that have required you, after so many years, to revisit this issue of conflict of disclosures by those serving at SEBI?
I don't think we can look at it that way. We are saying that 2008 was the last, this was there. So it requires an update. Now, why not now?
Why not 6 months ago or 6 months later?
Well, you can always ask a question, For every decision that we are taking it today, you can say, why not 6 months earlier?
So no connection to recent.
So, of course, you could say that, there was a certain trust that needs to be built up, if so to say. And secondly, people both in our organization and the outside, they need to be clear that things are fine. There is no such thing. There is no tendency to hide, and we don't want to do that. But we need to have a framework. See, the point is, if you don't have a framework, how do you know which one to be disclosed, how to be disclosed, how you might, if you have a complaint to make, how do you make a complaint, where does it go, how does it get mitigated? It's important that we look at these issues and what are the best practices around.
Sir, forgive me for pressing the same point, but we were told there were frameworks.
I'll not, we'll not get into the question.
Good evening, sir. This is Sajid here from NDTV Profit. Can you give us a change in the policy framework in which SEBI will now be operating? What I mean to say is that you used to set up a committee, then a discussion paper used to come out, and then you used to create an industry standards board. They will recommend something, and then a policy used to come out through a discussion paper, and then it goes to the board. Now that you have gone back on the merchant banking thing because it went through the same process, is there a change in the way policy will be framed in SEBI going forward?
It will not be changed. In fact, it's a very robust process. SEBI has, I think, one of the best processes around when we have a consultation papers, we have public comments, we have a committee, and it has gone through all that thing. But it's a question of, again, taking a measured thing. When the committees are there, maybe a little bit of a more pressure of time sometimes, they can, because it's a question of also a time for deliberation. Now, if suppose something comes to this thing that whether there is a possibility of doing this, so why not do it? So in that case, before we really actually issue the regulation, it is better to take a little bit of more time and just refine it before it is issued.
You're saying currently it's not the case?
No, it is the case. As I said that, there is in particular cases, if we have certain decisions will requires a review, we may take a review.
Hello, sir. Thank you so much for doing this. This is Yash Jain from CNBC TV 18. One clarification and one question. As far as the clarification is concerned, you've said SEBI will not be the authority to decide the cooling off period when it comes to transitioning of PIDs between exchanges. Is it fair to assume that if one exchange says there is no cooling off period at all that is required, you would be all right with that? The question is, when you're taken over also, you had spoken about how, along with domestic investors, FPIs are also very, very crucial for the Indian markets with respect to the capital that they bring in. One step has been taken with respect to, the disclosure norms being relaxed for them. What more are you looking at? Is it largely on the policy side? Is it on the taxation side, or something away from both these points that you're looking at to make Indian markets more, friendly for foreign portfolio investors also to find them attractive here? Thank you.
I think you have asked two questions, two very different questions, but I'll take it. The first question relating to, this cooling off thing. Now, cooling off thing, what we've found is that you don't have any cooling off requirements for MDs, for example, or the KMPs. But we have imposed a cooling off for PIDs. Now, public interest directors are very important people, and they are, as I said, SEBI's also eyes and ears, so to say, protecting, and therefore we are exempting the shareholder approval on that. Because I think some of these organizations, the shareholders could be, presumably, suppose they may also move from a business motive. But here the PIDs have no such, because they're not even approved by the shareholders. So we should not make it difficult for the PIDs to move, because PIDs also are not necessarily in a very big supply. So right now, we have no, sort of restriction sometimes for the other ones, MD, KMPs, but restriction only for PIDs. We just wanted to make it uniform. PIDs are in no way, one PID, in fact, if it moves from one MI to another, it's welcome, because it's from one MIA also, he's actually bringing in investor protection from one and to taking investor protection to another MII. So to that extent, I think nothing will be lost, really.
On the question?
Yeah, on FPIs, as I said, that FPIs have to really decide where they want to go for what return. And I think things change and they can decide. What we will say is that we are providing, the kind of regulations, etc., which will really facilitate. We are in no way wanting to, sort of scare anybody away or things like that. And we are willing to engage as much as we are willing to engage with all domestic capital as well. So, engaging with people with capital and making markets, strong, that is also, one of the goals SEBI has.
Hi sir, this is Yatin Mota from CNBC Awaz. Sir, speculation के matter पे पूछना चाहूँगा. When you talk about speculation in the derivative markets, exchanges have been recently changing days of expiry to probably compete with each other. There is one of the exchanges which has recently got capitalized, looking to again come with the future and option framework. So on the matter of speculation, what is the regulatory stance? Would these frequent changes in day of expiry taken into cognizance by the regulator? And in the matter of the cash segment, Bhatia sir has done a commendable job to shell companies, wherein we have seen orders from the regulator, wherein market capitalizations were manipulated, wherein sales were zero, promoter holding was zero. And there is still a lot of these shell companies in the marketplace. So, in the matter of investigation, is SEBI looking at further, clamping down on such, shell companies, because enforcement agencies have taken this order, and, had a raid on certain premises in Ahmedabad. So both on the derivative side and the capital market side, how are you really looking at the speculation part, which has been increasing day by day?
Well, I'll just reply this thing briefly, and will ask my colleagues also to supplement. First of all, futures market F&O is important for us. It's important for any market because, so it's not something which is, it's required for hedging, it's required for market making, for price discovery. What we have really been saying is that when we had a problem with index options on expiry day. I think that was a huge problem because it was coming on a single day and with this thing. And then we also had this issue of, how do we really measure our exposure, where I think certain nuanced position is required. So a certain steps were taken for a while, and then we have also put out a paper, and on which we have received some 800 suggestions, and we are fully engaged with the various things. And incidentally, there is a detailed discussion with market participants and the relevant people in SEBI while drafting that paper as well. So I would like to ask Mr. Anant Narayan to further elaborate on that.
So I think you've covered it well, sir.
just to reiterate, derivative.
Well, live press convened by newly appointed SEBI Chief Tuhin Kanta Pandey. He gave us an overview of the proposals. More critical proposals moved in the recently concluded crucial board meeting. These proposals, as reiterated by the SEBI Chief, are broadly based on ease of doing business, ease of compliance, and also some regulatory shifts that would impact investment flows and corporate governance, which are widely aimed at enhancing and promoting more market transparency and also promoting investor protection. He also spoke on increase in FPI threshold under size criteria. He spoke about how board has decided to revise it based on the public recommendations. Also on the FBI Advisory Committee. He spoke on the decisions that were taken on Category 2 on AIF, that is the alternate investment funds. This in the category of ease of compliance and business models. And one of the important takeaways of that presser was SEBI has decided to constitute a high-level committee on conflict of interest, which will be primarily tasked or assigned with reviewing and strengthening of the framework. We'll be getting you the highlights or the high points of that important SEBI press conference in our subsequent bulletins as well. But with that, it's time to wrap up this edition of DD India Live. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India mobile app. This app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. You can scan this QR code and you can download this now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Sakal Bhatt from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Live.
Kerala encapsulates the emotion of India with its vibrancy and diversity.
This is live from New Delhi. You're watching DT India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Sakal Bhatt, and coming up in the next 30 minutes. Jailed Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu declared opposition presidential candidate amidst fierce protest as over 1,100 people detained in the unrest. US and Russia talk on maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea and other confidence-building measures in Riyadh. Kremlin says Russia and US have common understanding on ending Ukraine war. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney calls for a snap polls on 28th of April aimed amid trade war with US. A top story. Turkey's embattled Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu was officially nominated as a presidential candidate by the opposition Republican People's Party for the 2028 elections as thousands and thousands continue to protest against İmamoğlu's arrest. CHP, the main opposition party and the second largest party in parliament, held a primary election on Sunday at which the only candidate was İmamoğlu, the main political rival of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. DD India's Antra Sinha gets us more.
The arrest of former mayor of Istanbul has triggered a tsunami of protests in Turkey. Tens of thousands of protesters clashed with police on Istanbul Sunday as demonstrations against the arrest of the mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu entered their fifth day. Rattled by the deluge of violent protests, Turkish President Erdogan is calling it street terrorism. The protesters say that the moves against İmamoğlu, including slapping of corruption charges, are a blatant attempt to silence President Tayyip Erdogan's main political rival. Istanbul streets witnessed pitched, intense battles as police fired pepper spray and tear gas at protesters who retaliated by throwing fireworks and projectiles. İmamoğlu's wife, Dilek İmamoğlu, denounced the charges against her husband as unlawful and an example of blatant injustice. We had a hard day today for all of us, but what do we say? We will win by resisting. They arrested Ekrem. They do not realize how, in the conscience of millions, this is an unjust and unlawful decision. But they will learn. This is a very deep pain of blatant injustice. Amid protests, Turkey's main opposition CHP held a symbolic primary. The poll was intra-party, but the outpouring of support for İmamoğlu made the party open the voting to anyone who wished to participate. 15 million voters decided to vote. The massive turnout highlights İmamoğlu's broad appeal and cements his status as a key challenger to President Erdogan. The primary has become a rallying point for opposition.
We expect the government to turn back from this mistake. We want the law to really work. We want it to decide independently. We will do our best for this. We will continue to struggle.
I think İmamoğlu's arrest and detention decision is completely unlawful. It was also there during the persecution of our friends. It makes me very emotional to witness everything firsthand.
The arrest of and action against İmamoğlu has sparked a protest of unprecedented scale, and anger is increasing by each passing day, with protesters determined to carry on till demands are met. Turkey is in for chaotic and destabilizing days ahead. Antra Sinha for DD India.
Meanwhile, the European Commission has urged Turkey to uphold democratic values following the jailing of Istanbul mayor and opposition leader Ekrem İmamoğlu.
The arrest of the mayor İmamoğlu and the protesters give rise to the questions regarding Turkey's adherence to its long-established democratic tradition. As a Council of Europe member and an EU candidate, Turkey must uphold democratic values. These rights, the rights of elected officials, as well as the right of peaceful demonstrations, need to be fully respected.
In other news, American and Russian officials met in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia to discuss a partial ceasefire in Ukraine on Monday. Officials are now studying in possible resumption of the Black Sea Initiative, an year-long agreement that allowed millions of tons of grain and other food exports to be shipped from Ukraine's ports. The Ukrainian team, which led talks with the U.S. officials in the same venue on Sunday, waited nearby in case of progress. President Trump is pressing for a rapid end to the three-year war and hopes the latest round of talks in Riyadh could pave the way for a breakthrough. Russia is being represented by former diplomat Grigory Karasin, who is now chair of the Federation Council's Foreign Affairs Committee, and Sergei Basida, who is an advisor to the Director of the Federal Security Services. Whereas the U.S. side was being led by Andrew Peake, a senior director at the White House National Security Council, and Michael Anton, a senior State Department official. The Kremlin said on Monday that Russia and the U.S. had a common understanding, however, adding that the negotiations are focused on technical issues, including the Black Sea Initiative, which is about the security of shipping in the region.
There is a common understanding. There are still many different aspects related to the settlement to be worked out.
Earlier on Sunday, U.S. officials held talks with a Ukrainian delegation led by Defense Minister Rustem Umerov in Saudi Arabia. Defense Minister Umerov described talks as constructive and meaningful, focusing on protecting energy facilities and critical infrastructure. He emphasized President Zelensky's aim is of achieving a just, lasting peace for Ukraine and Europe. The discussions are part of the U.S. President Donald Trump's diplomatic efforts to resolve the three-year Ukraine-Russia conflict. The Ukrainian president stated on Sunday that the discussions with the U.S. and Saudi Arabia were productive and Ukraine's delegation contributed constructively to the talks.
Today marks the second meeting between the Ukrainian and U.S. teams in Saudi Arabia, this time at a more technical level. Our military, our diplomats, and our representatives from the Ministry of Energy. I just spoke with Rustem Umerov. He briefed me on the meeting and the course of the negotiations. Our team is working in a completely constructive manner. The conversation is quite useful.
French President Emmanuel Macron will be hosting a summit of the Coalition of the Willing supporting Ukraine on 27th of March to discuss further military aid for Kyiv. Meeting will focus on short-term military support for Ukrainian forces and explore how European countries can provide long-term security guarantees to help Ukraine sustain its defense. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and leaders from the multiple European countries are expected to attend the Paris summit. Zelensky is urging European Union leaders to promptly approve a package of at least $5.45 billion for artillery shells and continued pressure on Russia. Greenland's outgoing Prime Minister Mut Egde on Monday accused Washington of interfering in its political affairs with the visit of an American delegation this week to the Arctic island coveted by U.S. President Donald Trump. In an interview, Prime Minister said a planned visit to the island by U.S. officials, including Second Lady Usha Vance, is highly aggressive. Trump has repeatedly expressed interest in the U.S. taking the island by force or economic coercion, even as Denmark and Greenland have firmly rejected the idea. Greenland is rich in raw materials, including minerals critical to advanced new technologies. European Union Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas visited Jerusalem on Monday and warned that Israel's strikes on Syria and Lebanon threatened to worsen the situation. She said that Israel has a right to self-defense against any terror attacks, but military actions must be proportionate.
Israel has the right of self-defense against terror attacks, whether from Hamas, the Houthis, or Hezbollah. However, military actions must be proportionate. And Israeli strikes into Syria and Lebanon risk further escalation.
Political campaigns have started to gather momentum after Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney called a snap election for April 28. The election in Canada comes at a time when tension with the US is running high on tariff front. Mark Carney is seeking votes to deal with the threat from US, while opposition Conservatives blames Carney to be an elitist who plans to continue policy of high government spending. Other key players in elections are Bloc Québécois and New Democratic Party. Fuzel Ahmed reports.
Leaders of political parties in Canada have started their campaign after the announcement of snap elections for April 28th. Besides handling of soaring housing costs and an affordability crisis, tariff war with the United States is likely to dominate the elections in Canada. Although the next election was not due until October 20th, Mark Carney is hoping to capitalize on a remarkable recovery by his Liberal Party in the polls since January, when Trump began threatening Canada.
Our response must be to build a strong economy and a more secure Canada. President Trump claims that Canada isn't a real country. He wants to break us so America can own us. We will not let that happen. We're over the shock of the betrayal, but we should never forget the lessons. We have to look out for ourselves. We have to look out for each other.
Riding the anti-incumbency wave until recently, the Conservatives now seek to rekindle the anger and disappointment associated with Justin Trudeau's economic policies. They have sought to portray Mark Carney as an elitist who plans to continue the Trudeau-era policy of high government spending.
They are the same Liberals, with the same ministers, the same MPs, the same advisors, the same policies, and even today making the same promises that they've been breaking for over 10 years. And who did they choose to bring in? Mr. Carney. Under the Liberals, led by Trudeau or Carney, what we have is out-of-touch, weak leadership. And for Mr. Carney, someone who will not stand up for our country.
On the other hand, Bloc Québécois is a key player in predominantly French-speaking province of Quebec.
I do not have the feeling that Quebecers trust so much Mr. Poilievre. And I do not have the feeling that Quebecers know so much about Mr. Carney. So if what they propose is good, they have nothing to fear, because as we did in the last 6 years, we will support what is good for Quebec.
While left-leaning New Democratic Party focuses on worker and labor issues. The announcement of elections come at a time when tensions have escalated with the United States. US presidential tariffs and calls to annex Canada have fueled anger among many Canadians. Thousands rallied in downtown Toronto for Elbows Up Canada amid US-Canada trade war. Huge demonstrations, enough to assure all that Trump trade and tariffs are going to be a major factor in these polls. Fuzel Ahmed's report for DD India.
In other news, South Korea's Constitutional Court has reinstated Prime Minister Han Duck-soo as acting president, dismissing his impeachment in a 5-1 vote. The decision follows a political crisis over suspended President Yoon Suk-yeol's alleged attempt to subvert civilian rule. Han's impeachment, driven by opposition over judicial appointments, impacts Yoon's pending impeachment case. At least 6 of the 8 justices must vote to remove Yoon, otherwise he will be reinstated. The court will begin arguments in President Yoon's criminal trial on April 14th. The court's decision has also sparked widespread protests, with hundreds of thousands of South Koreans taking to the streets over the weekend. The protests in South Korea have intensified ahead of the court verdict, with rallies for and against Yoon drawing large crowds. Situation remains volatile, with the court's ruling on Yoon's impeachment expected to exacerbate societal fissures. Prime Minister Pyeongtran Shinawatra on Monday faced a no-confidence motion in Parliament of Thailand as the opposition alleged she was being unduly influenced by her father, a former Prime Minister, and is mismanaging the country. Pyeongtran, who took office last year, is expected to survive her first no-confidence vote on Wednesday with the backing of a ruling coalition that makes up the majority of the House of Representatives. The opposition party in parliament has accused Pyeongtran for neglecting country's chronic problems, including slumping economy, air pollution, crimes and corruption. They have also claimed that her administration was serving the interest of her family and her father. And still to come on this edition of DT India Live. On the other side, we get you details on the Security and Exchange Board of India deciding to constitute a high-level committee on conflict of interest, disclosures pertaining to property, investments and liabilities. President Murmu says task of bringing left-wing extremism affected people to mainstream in final stage. India is accelerating efforts to eliminate tuberculosis by 2025. You're watching DT India Live. I'm Sakal Bhatt. Securities and Exchange Board of India, or SEBI, has decided to constitute a high-level committee on conflict of interest, disclosures pertaining to property, investments and liabilities. The high-level committee will comprise of eminent persons and experts with relevant background. The committee will comprehensively review and make recommendations for enhancing the existing framework for managing conflicts of interest, disclosures and related matters.
The day I had joined, I had mentioned that we'll come up with our plan, how we will handle the conflict of interest and other issues. So today the board has decided to constitute a high-level committee to undertake a comprehensive review of the provisions relating to conflict of interest, disclosures pertaining to property, investments, liabilities, etc. and related matters in respect of members, that includes the chairman and officials of the board.
SEBI also proposed at the board meeting to increase the FPI threshold under the size criteria.
The board has decided to revise based on public comments and recommendations of FPI Advisory Committee. So this size criteria is now being taken from 25,000 crore to 50,000 crore. But please note that the concentration criteria remains the same.
India's President Draupadi Murmu graced the Silver Jubilee celebrations of the Chhattisgarh Legislative Assembly in Raipur on Monday. While addressing the Assembly, President Murmu said that the task of connecting people affected by left-wing extremism to the mainstream of society has reached its final stage. Further, she expressed confidence that the people of state will soon achieve success in their efforts to completely free Chhattisgarh from extremism. Security forces busted a major terrorist hideout in a remote forest area in Poonch district of Jammu and Kashmir, leading to the recovery of a huge cache of arms and explosives. The hideout was unearthed during a joint operation by Rashtriya Rifles and Special Operations Group of local police in Sarabara near Sangla Top during the day-long operation. However, no one has been arrested during the operation. The penultimate week of the budget session of Parliament saw proceedings in both houses adjourned following uproar by the opposition members. Lok Sabha, or the lower house, was adjourned twice, first till 12 noon and later till 2 p.m. after opposition MPs carried posters, an act that the Speaker strongly disapproved of. The Speaker reminded the House that a previous decision had barred members from bringing any kind of posters inside the chamber. While the Rajya Sabha, or the upper house, was also adjourned first until 2 p.m. and later for the day amid similar disruptions, the uproar escalated when Parliamentary Affairs Minister Kiran Rijiju raised the issue of Karnataka Deputy Chief Minister D.K. Shivkumar's reported statement about amending the constitution to provide reservations to Muslims. This led to loud protests from the opposition benches, further stalling proceedings. With tensions running high, all eyes will be on the Parliament when the session resumes later today. Well, March 24th marks World Tuberculosis Day, a reminder of the urgent need to eliminate one of the world's deadliest infectious diseases. This year's theme, Yes, We Can End TB, Commit, Invest and Deliver, highlights the importance of global commitment, investment and action in combating tuberculosis. In India, the government is accelerating efforts to eliminate the disease by 2025.
World Tuberculosis Day is observed every year on March 24, the date when Dr. Robert Koch discovered the bacterium responsible for tuberculosis in 1882. Over a century later, TB remains a major global health crisis, causing millions of deaths and imposing severe social and economic burdens. TB is a highly contagious airborne disease primarily affecting the lungs. The infection spreads when an infected person coughs, sneezes or spits, releasing bacteria into the air. Drug-resistant TB is an emerging challenge, making treatment more difficult. This year, India is intensifying its fight against tuberculosis. Minister of State for Health and Family Welfare, Anupriya Patel, inaugurated the India Innovation Summit, pioneering solutions to end TB in New Delhi on March 18.
The National TB Elimination Program is steadily progressing towards the goal of TB elimination from the soil of India and has made some key achievements. WHO's Global TB Report 2024 has also acknowledged that the incidence rate of TB in India has shown a 17.7% decline from 237 per lakh population in 2015 to 195 per lakh population in 2023.
The National TB Elimination Program states that the number of missing cases has been reduced from 15 lakh in 2015 to 2.5 lakh in 2023. According to WHO's Global TB Report 2024, the incident rate of TB in India has shown a 17.7% decline from 237 per lakh population in 2015 to 195 per lakh population in 2023. TB deaths have reduced by 21.4% from 28 per lakh population in 2015 to 22 per lakh population in 2023. Minister Patel also added that TB treatment coverage in India increased by 32% in last 8 years, from 53% in 2015 to 85% in 2023. In India's northeastern state of Meghalaya, Ridalin Shulai, a 33-year-old TB survivor from East Khasi Hills, opened up about her personal battle with multi-drug resistant tuberculosis.
TB itself, which has an attachment with stigma, So when they are diagnosed with TB, most of the champion, they don't want to share the status. I realized that counseling is such a powerful tool for TB champion, because with the side effects of the medicines, it really plays, the psychological effects as well. So emotional support is what they needed the most.
As the world works towards ending tuberculosis, India's rapid progress and innovative approaches offer hope for a future free of this disease. The challenge remains tough, but with sustained efforts and global collaboration, TB elimination is very much within reach. Bureau Report, DD India.
And on World Tuberculosis Day, India reaffirmed its commitment to eliminating tuberculosis and improving healthcare for vulnerable population. India's Minister of Health and Family Welfare, JP Nadda highlighted key initiatives taken under Prime Minister Narendra Modi's leadership. The government has launched India 100 Days TB Elimination Campaign in high-burden districts, focusing on high-burden districts and ensuring TB services reach the grassroots level. Recognizing nutrition's role in recovery, financial support for nutritional needs was increased from 500 rupees per month to 1,000 rupees per month. Minister Nadda also urged collective action for a TB-free India by ensuring better healthcare access and stronger support for patients. Well, that's for all we have for you in this edition of DD India Live, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India mobile app. This app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on the screen to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Sakal Bhatt, and from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Live.